I just turned on the recording. We're live, or kind of quote unquote live. But all right, before we get started, did you get a chance to try out the Open AI chat?
Mhm.
What are your thoughts about this? This is fascinating. I get a chance to anytime I talk to someone, I try to ask them what they think and what the implications are.
Well, to me, it's
Y-
scary. Like, to me, it's scary how believable it is. So it's like, implications obviously are all over the place, I think, but to me, it's just almost a culture shock. It's okay. This is AI. There's no way this is AI. There's really somebody under the hood, isn't there? Um,
It reminds me of the first, if you recall, was there a chess thing where it was like an apparatus, like back in the day, where they brought in there's a chess thing where you play with it, and it was actually somebody underneath and moving the pieces. It was back in the early 1900s, I think. And whoever listens to this maybe can correct me, but it feels just like that.
that's the way it does. And I don't know if you've used Jasper AI or any of it's using kind of the same engine to do content creation for blogging. So it's like you start giving it some ideas and then it continues and it makes like a 2,000 word blog article for you. And it looks like you wrote it and pulling it from sources on the internet. And it's like really backing up a valid article for you, completely written by AI.
So here's the problem, though, that I think people are not reading, this stuff anymore, and so it's machine writing for machines,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
I can't remember the last time I read anything online. At least, I read like physical copies of books, but
Mhm.
um, and then now it creates this, and we consume the content the way we do it now, right? We're chatting, and somebody may be on a treadmill or walking or doing something else and listening to this podcast. But so in what's scary piece, I've seen a lot of LinkedIn reviews of people that say, "Whoa, this is great! I can get my senior engineer to do a job that took them 3 hours. It takes them now 5 minutes." So now that means that they don't need as many, right? Or potentially can do more. I don't know what, depending on which category of progress impact are you looking for? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, it's only as good as the data that it's given. So, it's learning from our mistakes. So, it's mistakes that we make and become a part of its sample data, are going to be a part of its output. So it's really going to be just as error prone as humans. And, yes, it might be faster, but, I think then, the human role is going to shift to being QA of that, that code that was written by the AI. If it's like networking configs, great. Network configs, awesome to have a robot writing that for me, but somebody's still got to check it and make sure that it's not a bunch of mistakes that are going to end up breaking some enterprise somewhere. And same with code. I was looking at one where uh, the robot was the AI was writing code for these coders, and they were blown out of the water because they were like, "This is exactly what I would have written." It took it point 0.3 seconds to write this code that would have taken me hours. But who knows how many bugs, and how many security faults actually might be in there because it's learning from our code. It's learning from human mistakes. So yeah.
And what are the implications for bad actors and adversaries to use these types of engines for nefarious actions from, thinking out loud, you can start doing all kinds of social engineering to kind of pen testing to finding loopholes. And I mean, there's so much stuff you can do with it. It's a race to the
Absolutely.
finish line.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So social engineering is an easy outlet for it. Let's say you have an AI chatbot. using LinkedIn, using SMS, using email, using phone calls, and it is, using whatever methods to social engineer you over all these channels. And then on the pen testing side, let's say there's thousands of playbooks that people have come up with over time and different routines they're using in Metasploit or whatever. And now these applications can use these playbooks, these AI algorithms can use these playbooks at will. And not to mention, discovering new ones. If something existed one time on the internet, it could be a part of that sample, and that now that algorithm that starts reaching for because it realizes that it's a way to get in. Uh, so there's those possibilities, but I think one of the things that as society starts adopting these technologies more, threat actors, I think, have an opportunity to poison the data going into these that are teaching these algorithms what the norm is. What does good code look like? What does good speech look like? What does good music look like? What does good, et cetera. So, if the threat actor's poisoning that input sample, then, with how many records of bad code, or vulnerable code, that it's now giving this algorithm, and it's going to introducing these vulnerabilities into code that it writes, is potentially a problem also.
But do you think can he do that with a large enough sample size? I mean, we're talking about, millions of records is
Right.
potentially. So how would you go about poisoning something like that? You have to be methodical. You might
Yeah.
almost have to use a modified AI engine to
Yeah.
poison, poison the kind of legitimate one.
Exactly. Yeah. Because if you're just throwing a couple poisonous samples out there, it's going to be statistically insignificant in the AI model. So you'd have to have some kind of engine spitting out poison data, at a rate that would actually make it statistically significant to the model. And, but yeah, it's interesting stuff to think about. I think the next couple of years are going to be, it's going to be really interesting.
To say the least. Well, does it apply to us? Is it basically saying it's job security? Just there's more stuff to worry about. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, deepfake alone is enough of a security concern for some people. And I think all of these just add extra layers to it. And we're gonna have to figure out how to identify, when we're getting messages from a human on LinkedIn or messages, SMS messages, what is actually from a person and what's not. And in addition to trying to filter out, are they trying to social engineer me? Is this person trying to, which we're already highly suspicious of now. Anybody time somebody sends me a message on LinkedIn, it's going through my filters first. Is this person trying to is are they a threat actor and just pretending to be somebody legitimate? But now it's just more that we have to deal with, and I think the amount of phishing that we're already struggling to deal with, the amount of social engineering that we're already struggling to deal with from an email security point of view, we're already really failing, from a security point of view, at training our staff, at protecting their boxes from the threat getting there in the first place. We're doing a very poor job. And then with this increased threat and this increased potential, I think it's going to be a real problem for us.
And the interesting piece is that while we're talking about the latest and greatest in potential threats and latest trends in technology, there are still a lot, almost like the lion's share of companies that struggle with basic stuff, basic email hygiene, basic access management hygiene, basic everything. So, is the gap getting larger and larger while there's on one end of the the continuum. There's the deep fake, which are obviously, of concern, but are, all the way to the other side, and basic two-factor authentication on the other side. What are your thoughts? Is the gap just completely getting to be almost unmanageable for some?
Yeah, I think that first of all, therapists can probably make a lot more money off of this security professionals than they currently are. Because we're looking at our threat landscape just expanding. And now the fact that, with insider threat just being amplified, with third party risk being amplified, literally there's nothing safe anymore. And the attacker most of the time isn't hacking through some complicated hacking mechanism into our network. Usually they're logging in with credits that they stole and into our systems, and or a token, and they're phishing our MFA, et cetera. So it seems like it's just an ever expanding attack surface, and it's feeling like it's impossible to control at this point. And so that's where it is. It's really scary to think about the new stuff, considering that there are so many people who haven't even implemented basic hygiene, who are still using the same password on everything, or still haven't rolled out MFA, or still completely unpatched environments, don't have good resilience plans, and don't have good backup plans, and just basic, IT and security stuff, let alone like mid-tier of maturity and trying to harden machines and trying to implement CIS and stuff like that. Like so many companies aren't anywhere near there. I'd say, most of them aren't, and a lot of them just don't think that the risk is for them. They don't think that the threat is real. Some of them think that the safeguards that they do have in place, antivirus, a firewall, et cetera, are good enough. And they don't really realize how far things have come in the last 5-10 years. So yeah, to me, it feels like it's spiraling out of control. Our you know, complete attack surface, threat management, risk management. It just seems like it's just ever expanding, and yeah, real opportunities for a therapist to get involved with those security professionals. And
Maybe it's one of those things that there's got to be a practice, specific to security professionals. So if anybody's listening and has a therapist practice, by all means, go ahead and maybe decide to find that this is a great niche to follow. Um, and in your mind, what are kind of the next big thing? We always hear, when the Ukraine got invaded, there were, this fear about kinetic warfare combined with cyber warfare, and there's already rumors of attacks on our infrastructure.
Mhm.
To cyber, it seems like it's just, I don't know. Again, causality is not determined by current events. But what are your thoughts? I mean, are we advancing to a place where there's like a major cyber war that has potential impact, or is it still a status quo? Like, okay, like nuclear weapons, we have nuclear weapons, but nobody in the right mind would use them.
Right. Yeah, I think that cyber warfare, along with kinetic, is a reality from now on, and I think we're probably going to see a lot of uh, wars that really just skip the kinetic part in the future here. It'll probably be a state actor, state threat actor, um, a real nation state warfare between countries and critical infrastructure. CISA has really been focusing on shoring us up in the U.S. But and I think that we see with Ukraine, with that situation, that Russia has been hammering their infrastructure for years. And really, they've had to develop ways to be resilient and manual fail safes for things like their electric grid and water and things like that, because they realize they can't trust cyber. Now we, in the U.S., are highly reliant on a fragile infrastructure for controlling power, water, et cetera, and our food, our banking, all of that could easily be attacked in
Yeah, let's
cyber
double click
warfare.
on the what you just mentioned, fragile. For the people who are not, familiar with the current state of affairs, in can you expand on that? I know a lot of it is older,
Yes.
um, unpatched,
Yes.
potentially out of service machines. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah. So if we think about operational technology, IoT, but operational technology, PLC systems and such that are running a lot of our, power grid, nuclear systems, water systems, and, beyond that, just manufacturing in general and pharmaceutical production and food production and things like that. Really, everything that is at an industrial scale is managed by OT networks. And in general, OT investments that companies make, they keep them alive forever. So it's not common for people to buy like a Siemens PLC to run this factory line and then replace it 5 years with a newer model.
And
It's
PLC, for those who are not familiar with,
it's a programmable logic controller. It is something that will help, basically attaches the network to the manufacturing so that they can control pumps, control relays, etc., using this controller from the network. It's a way to add automation to old school network. I mean, to old school manufacturing. So,
in in pursuit of efficiencies, right? I mean, a lot of
yes,
it has something to do with efficiencies, going
yep,
greener, you shaving
yeah,
off. So there's a race on one side to connect all those systems, the legacy system to grab data and big data and analyze
yep,
and create better processes. And then so on one side, and then the other side is now you expose
yep.
all those controllers to the outside world potentially.
Exactly, and they're largely unpatched. Some of the manufacturers go out of business very quickly. So it's, they release this cool tool and then that manufacturer doesn't exist. And but the big ones like Siemens and Honeywell and stuff like that do, but usually they will patch it for a certain amount of time, but then they will say, okay, this is end of life, buy a new one. And what I've seen from manufacturing clients that I support is that, most of them don't replace them, and they're supporting infrastructure that's 10, 20 years old. And so it's riddled with vulnerabilities. And so SCADA systems and are kind of the bridge. It's taking all these PLCs, it's taking all these operational technology devices and giving it a central control platform that's accessible from the internet. And a lot of times that is kind of the attack vector that the threat actor is using. But it may not be the SCADA system. It may be that they have some other point of entry into the network. They stole your, janitor's creds and now they're on your network, and now they're able to control all of your manufacturing with your network. And from those old devices that are unpatched, a lot of them have default creds too. So a lot of them, are still admin or whatever the default creds are for that device. So there's we have a long way to go to protect our infrastructure, and whether it's manufacturing, food production, pharmaceutical production, electricity, other energy, water, they're all using these same platforms in the back end, and they're pretty susceptible to attack right
Yeah, and there was some very scary cases in Ukraine, for example, where um, tractors, John Deere tractors, got
now.
stolen, and then the Ukrainians were able to disable them remotely.
Mhm.
So all of a sudden, and what are the implications, for example, for our U.S. economy and the food production supply chain, if all of a sudden somebody manages to remotely disable, you know, a majority of the tractors? would be out of food like very, very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you think about really how the U.S. acted during the COVID pandemic, and there were things missing from shelves in the stores and things like that, I think we would have the same kind of effect. We realize we have a problem, we'd go through any reserves fairly quickly, and then we'd have empty shelves. And there's, I think, lag is just going to be a couple weeks in realizing what the effect is on something like food production. Same thing with like we're seeing with baby formula, things like that, and other pharmaceuticals that there, some of these only last so long, and there's only so much surplus in supply. So you know it could affect us a lot. And but my immediately, the biggest thing that could be affected is energy. If they take down an energy grid, whether it's a regional one that's taking down several major metro areas, or whether it's something larger where they're doing a coordinated attack against several regions, it could be something that could impact everyone and really set the economy back and set commerce back. And if you think about how we do transactions, how we work, everything is electronic. So, um, coordinated attacks from a state level threat actor could really set our country back.
And the scary piece is that we're, specifically talking about the digital economy and you know, converting everything to digital. And I think the pandemic was the accelerated piece, but which makes us even more vulnerable than before. Uh, there's almost no backup. There used to be backup where some of this stuff was done pen and paper or physical transactions, but not anymore. And they're also moving to digital currency. So imagine, at least today, if the ATM system is down, you still have hopefully some cash on you so you can purchase goods and services. But if it's all digital and there's no connectivity between your mobile device and the issuing currency provider, then what's next? We'll have to, you either have to starve or you have to barter, go back into, I'll give you a loaf of bread, you'll give me back, a can of tuna. That's, that's basically it.
Yeah, I've done a lot of incident response, especially ransomware incident response over the last 5 years. That's pretty much half of what the company I work for does, is incident response for ransomware situations. And I see the effect of ransomware on the company, and the fact that, sometimes they're down for weeks, months, while rebuilding everything from scratch. So it can be very impactful on one company. And most state level threat actors aren't using ransomware. Most of them are just using other things like Wiper, which will completely just nuke your hardware basically, or delete everything that you have, and not recoverable by paying a ransom, that kind of thing. So thinking about the effect that I see at a company, and sometimes they're very large enterprises, sometimes they're Fortune 500 companies, and just the amount of impact that company having ransomware has, if I amplify that across, an entire sector. Let's say there was a coordinated attack against finance and exactly what you're talking about goes down. All ATM or all currency is, everything. They have a lot of resilience mechanisms that they've built in order to be able to be resilient to that kind of attack. But I don't think they've had to suffer from a coordinated threat from that kind of uh, state level threat actor. So, it just makes my ransomware experience makes me really apprehensive about our ability as a state, as a country, to be able to recover from that kind of a coordinated attack against entire industry, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's logistics. If they took down our trucking industry, just, you know, They attacked like the 20 top major trucking carriers, and took down their logistics systems, and their ordering systems. Same effect. Fuel distribution, same kind of thing, and the trucks can't run anyway. There's so many ways that we are fragile. Um,
Yeah. So how do we reduce that fragility? And
yeah.
let's talk about, and I'd love to dive into your experience helping companies that were hit. Maybe we can take that,
Mhm.
micro and then maybe apply that to the macro.
Yeah.
So from your experience, what, from the ones that you've seen that recover
Mhm.
versus the ones that were more impacted by this,
Mhm.
what are the differences, and what, because I want some people to have some takeaways from this conversation. What can they do to become
Yeah.
more resilient and less fragile?
Yes. Yeah. So thinking about resiliency is something that's really only come around lately as a subject. People have been talking about disaster recovery for the last, 30, 40 years in IT. But then really like 10 years ago, it was kind of transformed into business continuity. How do we keep our business running despite a disaster or despite an attack going? But resilience is really the next evolution of that, is thinking about adaptation. It's saying, I'm under attack, but I'm able to bend and flex, and I'm able to bounce back from that attack. And truly resilient systems, you can attack a system and it will, uh, you know, continue to run. If you think about Zoom during the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, Zoom was under attack constantly. They were getting bombarded by threat actors, and yet their systems were continuing to operate, and they were able to continue to release security patches to mitigate those problems. So they've architected their solutions for that attack. And so adaptation is really something that we need to start thinking about. W- We are architecting our solutions based on a model of network architecture that's really, 20, 30 years old. That castle and moat concept. Zero trust really kind of improves on that. But our systems are still, as Sunil Yu says, they're really still pets. We're treating our servers as something that we have to manage for forever. Whereas companies that are using more cloud resources, their servers are really ephemeral, and it's okay if they die. They can just redeploy, that kind of thing. I think that more we get and this is a thing that'll take the next 20, 30 years, is our infrastructure going from pets to going towards cattle, going from individual servers we have to take care of to ephemeral cloud instances that we can just destroy at any time. If they get ransomware, they kill them off. We have detection mechanisms, whatever. If it gets attacked, it just gets nuked. Like, that's the ideal. But we're still in this old school point of view where we have all these servers we manage and take care of. And sometimes we're doing a really poor job of taking care of them and poor job of patching. So the long-term vision is an architectural change from being more the on-prem servers to more the ephemeral as a service cloud instances. That's the long term, but the short term that I'm seeing at organizations of all sizes, enterprises down to small businesses, most of them aren't even addressing basic hygiene. So most of them have a flat open network where anyone on the network can access any resource. And so it's not zero trust at all. It is somebody from HR can hit the finance servers from the
What's the inverse of zero trust?
exactly. The inverse of zero trust is this, is wide open. Yes, exactly.
Well, if it's binary zero one, so it's one trust. I think if we
Exactly.
think about it that way,
Exactly.
one trust.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what I'm seeing at a lot of enterprises. And, they may have, you know, 50,000 users on their network, and they may have several different subnets of IP addresses, but they really all have access to everything.
But
So there's,
they have to change that in order for you to get cybersecurity insurance.
yep.
For example, one of the implications are that you have to create some sort of privilege access,
Segmentation.
segmentation, privilege access management,
Yep.
and so on, because of just what you just described.
Yep. Yeah, and we're seeing that they are checking the box, saying that they have this in place, that they have segmentation in place, because yes, they have several VLANs. They have a VLAN for finance and a VLAN for HR and a VLAN for this and that, but they're all able to talk to each other still, in the end. And so ransomware is able to run rampant through there, and any other malware, if they have Quackbot or Emotet or something like that, it just spreads like wildfire through their systems, and an attacker can just go freely from any part of their network to any part of the network. So that is really the core of it. I think those what we're seeing as requirements from cyber insurance are really, I mean, they're requirements from cyber insurance for a reason. They're really the things that they're seeing get popped the most. And so cyber insurance is requiring now they'll say EDR or MDR. So they want managed detection and response. They want you to have some kind of endpoint solution on all your endpoints with somebody actually watching it, a SOC, something like that. Somebody watching it and somebody responsible for it. They want immutable backups. So in addition to just backups, they want a backup that you can actually restore from, even if you have ransomware. It's something that's air gapped, can't be changed. They want patching. So a lot of people are just running old legacy systems, and I see this a lot in enterprise. They'll invest millions of dollars in big, ERP systems and never patch it because they're afraid of breaking it. And so a couple of years later, it's just, it's been unpatched. So there's all these vulnerabilities. And, so, and then they're asking for segmentation, which is really reducing that blast radius. It's saying, okay, when finance gets uh, a worm or ransomware or a threat actor gets into finance, it shouldn't affect engineering, shouldn't affect HR, shouldn't affect all these other teams. So, you know, adding these controls in is, something that insurance is requiring. And then MFA, I'm still seeing, even at large enterprises, is missing a lot. A lot of times the IT guys are using MFA, but the rest of the company is not. They haven't adopted it yet. They haven't made a big push
And
to force everyone to
why
use it.
why is that, Art? I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
Mhm.
It's fairly simple to
Yeah.
implement. The cost is very low comparably, and then also I would say user adoption should be seamless
Yeah.
almost, because people are already used to having, access to two-factor access to MFA after, like, for your bank account, for
Yep.
your, I mean, almost anything. So what's holding them back?
I think a lot of it is just top down motivation. So one example is a client that we manage, and the client refuses to implement MFA, and it's not because of the users. They would adopt it fine, I think. It's just because this old school executive does not want to have to deal with opening an authenticator app. So because they don't want to do that extra step, they're making so their whole company now has not implemented it. So the people that should, I mean, obviously IT staff and security staff, but their executive team and the people controlling the money especially should have MFA. But I think it belongs on every account. MFA should be on all your email accounts and all your VPN or remote access to the network. So somebody should not be able to VPN in without a remote challenge for MFA, or else a threat actor can VPN in without a remote access, without MFA challenge.
Yeah, it's incredible that they're the biggest offenders.
That's usually the executives not wanting to make a change.
And what about doing tabletop exercises, creating that muscle memory, if you
Right.
use military term, to who does what during a crisis? Because a lot of it is the failures, the outcome of the incident is becoming more severe due to the fact that people don't know what they're responsible for, and they think, okay, it's Joe or Joanne, and nobody does anything, and then end up with some pretty big issues.
Yeah. Yeah. I think tabletop exercises are definitely underutilized. One of the things, I mean, it's hard to get an executive's time in general. A lot of times they're busy. They're trying to make money for the organization. A CISO trying to get them to sit down to actually have a tabletop exercise can be a struggle. But definitely, at least semi-annually, I think that it should be gone through. Uh, when we do go through them, we almost always recognize something that's a process failure or a systemic failure that is really going to be either a major vulnerability or a way we can't recover. You know, you get to a certain point in the scenario and they're saying, "Oh, well, we just call this vendor to do this." And you realize that, okay, the vendor doesn't actually have support with you. They're not going to, they don't have any contract with you. They're not going to be there to help you, that kind of thing. And they're not involved in your tabletop exercise, because if you're considering them your lifeline, why aren't they there? So there's things like that always come up during a tabletop exercise. And like you're saying, people just don't know what they're responsible for. People are making a lot of assumptions that somebody else is taking care of something. And a lot of times, really, they're just putting a lot of onus on that CISO or on that IT team and just expecting them to take care of everything. And a big part of the incident is crisis management, is, um, you know, thinking about how the organization is going to continue forward and how they're going to communicate the breach internally and externally, how they're going to communicate to their customers, to their users, etc. And uh, that communication is almost never planned out before an incident. Companies should have a couple examples ready in template form that they can use for when an incident happens so that they don't have to go find a PR firm during an incident, which I've seen them do. Um, Bring in a PR firm and then a legal team to work together to craft the right response for the public. They should have this kind of pre-thought so it's not another stressor. And also kind of thinking about where their data lives is a good part about a tabletop exercise, because what kind of data they have, some of the things they panic about during an incident may not even be worth panicking about. And sometimes they're ignoring the stuff that is this critical PII that we've breached, et cetera, is being ignored while they're focusing on some customer list, that is not containing PII. So really kind of having an asset inventory and a data inventory is an important part of that tabletop. But yeah, that's something that a lot of organizations just aren't doing. And, um, you know, it should be a part of normal hygiene and a normal approach to security for organizations.
And it's almost like even the synthetic nature of these tabletops. You start at 9 a.m. You run a couple of quote unquote Dungeons and Dragons
Mhm.
scenarios, rolling the dice on things that happen, and then you wrap up. You go out to lunch. You come
Mhm.
back and do lessons learned. It's
Yep.
almost the whole environment is such. It's so synthetic. It's it's not what happened in real life. In real
Mhm.
life, it happens on Friday afternoon, 5 o'clock, just you where you're about to head out to vacation on vacation, and then the kids are screaming in the background, and you're all stressed out. You have no idea what to do, and you can't reach the critical. I mean, there's so many elements involved.
Mhm. Yep.
And then maybe due to the fact that they don't want to talk about it because it's almost like a ostrich putting their head in the sand, not
Yep.
wanting to figure out what's possible,
Yeah.
to not make it probable.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that almost all incidents are happening on Friday or, right before a major holiday. I had posted a bunch on LinkedIn about this right before Thanksgiving is, you know, we get attacked, our clients get attacked every year right before Thanksgiving. We get calls through the cyber insurance channel about major retailers that are in every mall in America that are down now on Thanksgiving, right before the biggest day of the year for their sales. Every retailer is looking forward to Black Friday or Cyber Monday to make all their sales and make up for any kind of losses the whole rest of the year. Now imagine they're not able to make any sales now. And that attack's always happening on the holiday when they know that Americans are relaxed. We're not paying attention to anything. We're not at work. We're at home eating dinner. And so yeah, the synthetic nature of these tabletops, I think it's a first step. The ransomware simulation is really the next step, and releasing a ransomware simulation on a weekend is probably would be a great idea. I don't think it's ever happened. I don't think any organization has ever done a simulation on a weekend, but I think that is probably the most accurate depiction, because then your stock is down to the one guy. Everybody else went home. You have the one guy who's on call over the weekend. You have, IT is out. Exec management is all out, and now how are you going to deal with this when you have ransomware on your network?
Yeah, and yeah, it seems like they're not willing to create those real life scenarios due to the fact that maybe they don't want to know what the results are and end up doing it in real time. There are a lot of, let me ask you this, are like there's a lot of vendors out there that are touting no more ransomware
Mm.
because they're creating all kinds of, whether it's in memory protection, endpoint security, you name it. There's just hundreds, if not thousands, of vendors that there are me too and saying, okay, we're solving this because it's a big issue and maybe that's where the money is. But still, there are a lot of people like yourself that are defending and are getting called when there's a crisis and ransomware hits. Why is that?
Well, I think most of that technology is not deployed yet. It hasn't had a wide adoption. Another thing is that the ones that are deployed, I'm seeing are misconfigured, or the creds are being stolen by the threat actor. This has happened more than once, where the threat actor has logged into the cloud security portal for that software and turned off the endpoint protection.
That is kind of craziness.
Yeah,
Let me
because
let
I
me
mean,
let me
if
just
they,
pause here for a second. Let that sink in. What you just said, Art. So you tell me that they are managing to steal the credentials for the same technology you're supposed to protect from ransomware and disable it prior to attacking.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So if you think about credential theft, if they release, whether it's Quackbot or Emotet on your network or something like that, they're able to steal creds. There's other things they can do, keyloggers, etc. But phishing is a common way. People set up SSO to make it easy for them to log in. Um, we've seen several times where the threat actor is logged into the person's dashboard that is, or company's dashboard that is managing that endpoint software, and has turned off protection, has enabled a policy for all their software that really turns off active protection and quarantine.
Yeah, incredible. And one of the things you mentioned, and I'd like to unwrap that as well, is that companies should have relationships with a company like yourself, potentially a PR firm, legal firm, so they don't have to try to find and create those relationship and figure things out when something occurs. You want to have somebody who already knows your business, knows where the infrastructure is, kind of know the lay of the land, and knows of you and how you operate, and maybe potentially even have an agreement in place to define exactly what the outcome is for when something happens. Uh, is that also your recommendation, and you see that as being more successful for mitigating this type of risk?
Yeah. So I think on this particular question, it really depends on company scale. So smaller businesses and medium-sized enterprises may not be able to afford an ongoing retainer with the company, but I think they should still form those relationships and identify who they're going to call. So a smaller business, let's say it's a 50-person, 100-person company, they're still at really the same risk of ransomware or a cyber incident, especially if they're critical infrastructure, if they're manufacturing, if they're energy or something. And there are a lot of smaller providers in those industries that they may not be able to afford a retainer with, CrowdStrike or with Mandiant or something like that. But they can at least identify what the numbers are that they're going to call, who they're going to call, who their cyber insurance has on their panel, and who they're willing to pay for. That's another factor is, cyber insurance may insist that you're using certain providers. So working with your cyber insurance provider and find out who are their preferred cyber legal firms, who are their preferred PR firms, who are their preferred, incident response firms and recovery firms, and build those relationships ahead of time. If you can get an agreement in place, that's better. Obviously, if you have NDA and agreements already in place, if you're able to do incident response retainer or a retainer with one of these law firms, that is always better than not. But I think at least having a plan of who to call, because a lot of times it's a scramble and nobody knows who to call. A lot of times we're getting the call 3 or 4 days after the incident has already hit the ground. So by then there is 100% attacker penetration in that network. There's every machine is infected and encrypted by the time we get the call. And that response could have gone a lot faster if the company had a plan in place, whether it's calling an outsourced vendor, whether it's, okay, this is what we're going to do in these methodical, we're going to shut off this network. We're going to, roll out these tools. We're going to, do this to isolate and contain the threat. Um, those kind of things need to be thought out beforehand as part of their incident response plan. And a lot of organizations may have an incident response plan, but it's not real. It's some template they got off the internet and doesn't really apply to them and isn't something they've thought out before. And I think those tabletop exercises, even if they're synthetic, is an opportunity to go through that incident response plan too.
Yeah, and even if you don't have to pay a monthly fee to a plumber, you still have to know that you have a plumber and have that maybe the magnet on that fridge that if you have a
Exactly.
leak, that you know who to call. That's
Yep.
basically it. You don't have to necessarily pay, but maybe you can have that conversation and then
Mhm.
call the plumber and say, "Hey, listen, I got two bathrooms. I have, two sinks. Here's the type of water softener that I use. And if something happens, I'm calling you because I need your help and have all those ducks in a row. And it doesn't
Exactly.
necessarily cost money, but it does require some preemptive work.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So and I like to bring these examples close to home because that makes people like feel that they understand this stuff because some of it is complicated.
Mhm.
So Art, let me ask you this: what's the best way for people to reach out to you to know more about what you guys do for additional advice or whatever the case may be? What's the easiest way?
Yeah. I've been really responsive on LinkedIn. So everybody reaches out to me on LinkedIn. It doesn't matter who you are, I'll respond to you and have a conversation with you. So, um, Art Ocain on LinkedIn is pretty much the best way. If there's something, whether it's discussing technology, whether it's discussing how to respond to stuff, I'll definitely have a quick meeting with you. If there's something where you want to engage our company, I can line up those conversations for you.
Yeah, and I highly recommend having those conversations prior to when your house is not on fire. Just to make sure that you at least have a connection to Art and we give you some really good advice. And thank you again for joining me today, Art. Much much appreciated. Thanks for all for joined. And stay safe online as well as offline. And I'll see you in the next episode.
All right. Thanks, David.
Thank you.